Okay, so it's
Welcome back, everybody. This is Coach Reese here with Coach Loretta and special guest Coach Madeline Harms. We're here with Coffee with Coaches. As you can see, I have my OMR sticker on my coffee mug. I love it very much. It makes my coffee actually taste better. Today, we're going to be talking about backyard ultras and strategies and tips and tricks that go into preparation and execution of a good backyard race. But first, I wanted to start this podcast because we were just talking about something super interesting, and I think it's something that could be, like pertinent to one of our listeners. So, Coach Loretta, do you want to go through what we were just talking about?
Oh, sure. But first, I want to step back a second. That nice sticker. Can you show that one more time?
Oh, here, yeah.
Because I believe Michelle is going to be ordering some more, so hopefully there'll be some on the website for sale if anybody wants to get yourself an Ornery Meal coaching sticker. Coach Madeline, you should have some on the way to your house too if you haven't
oh,
already received it.
awesome.
So yeah, so I was talking a little bit with Coach Madeline about I have a athlete that's going to be taking on his first 100, Chris Winters, at Superior 100 this year. Madeline lives in Minnesota, so I was
Yeah,
just really
Duluth.
picking her brain for some suggestions on the course. So I was talking about, he lives in an area, there's not a ton of hills and not a ton of probably technical trails for him, but he is doing the best to seek that out, and we are doing what we can to simulate the course. So do you want to talk a little bit about what your suggestion was for him? And I
Yeah.
bet he's listening too. He's an avid listener of our podcast.
Okay, great. Yeah, I think just like finding the most some technical trails if you have some in your area. I think it's like the hills you can kind of figure out, like ideally technical trails that go up and down. But at least for me, what I find the most challenging about the Superior Hiking Trail is that there is like roots and rocks and like stuff everywhere you have to watch out for that can make you trip or so you gotta, it's hard to get like in a rhythm on that course. Like there's not many like fast flowy sections and you just gotta be very vigilant about where your feet are going.
Okay. All right. That's
So
good.
yeah, so I think just getting on technical trails, ideally with some climbing is gonna be key for that.
Okay. Reese, is
Yeah,
my sound
so
better?
what's that?
Is my sound better?
It's still a little muffled, but that's okay. We can roll with it. I can still hear you. Okay, so what I wanted to add to this. So this past weekend, my girlfriend and I were at the Potawatomi course. We were doing some course reconnaissance, and the race director actually said that that course has a little bit more elevation per mile, and he said that the course itself is just as technical in certain areas as that Superior Trail 100. So for Chris, who's in the Crystal Lake area, 2.5 hours, west, southwest. Sounds like that is some prime grounds for training for that race. But otherwise, anybody that's in the Crystal Lake area is going to know that, Veteran Acres is going to be a super awesome place to train, especially the Stearns Woods area that has a little bit more like roots, rocks, technical up and downs for people familiar with the course, with Earth Day, Frozen Gnome, or Soul Crusher. You're gonna remember like that section where you go up and down the Tin Man area where there's a bunch of like metal car parts and stuff like that. So it sounds like going up and down that section is going to be prime training ground too. So that's a little preamble to our discussion today because we always like to talk with each other and just get insights. And I figured we might as well pass that along to other people.
Yeah. That's super good. And Chris is going to appreciate this. And he's also training for Earth Day. So he's going to be
Mhm.
spending time on that course anyway, doing some prep for that race. So it's perfect. It's good to hear that information. So thank you guys. This is what I love about coaching with other people is they can ask these things that I don't know.
Perfect. Well, okay, so let's get right into it. Madeline, can you tell us like your background with backyard ultras? What is a backyard ultra? What are you going to be doing soon?
Yeah, definitely. So yeah, I'll preface this by I'm not like a expert in running backyard ultras. I've done I guess I've done one before really, which is the same one I am training for right now. But last time I did it, it was a training run for the Cuddle 100 actually. So the plan was just to go 50K. At that time, the race started at 6 p.m. So practice kind of running through a lot of the night. And so it's like a 50K nighttime training run. But the basic premise of a backyard is that you go, it's like 4.2 miles. There's a 4.2 mile course, and you do it every hour on the hour with everyone else that's in the race. Um, and the race just keeps going. More and more people drop out as you go on. And the race keeps going until there's just one person left running, basically. So it's a very different type of format, different like psychological approach going into it. Again, when I did it before, it was more just like, okay, I'm gonna do a 50K and it's gonna take 8 hours because that's how it kind of works out. Um, and then it also works out, the distance works out so that after 24 hours, if you've done 24 laps or yards, they sometimes call it, then you've done 100 miles, which is actually a pretty good 100-mile time for most people. So,
Right.
so it seems like sometimes, if you're um, like an experienced runner might seem like, yeah, 4 miles an hour, that's like 15-minute mile pace. That's really slow. But it adds up after a while, the farther you go on. Yeah, so that's kind of what a backyard is. The one I'm doing is in Elm Creek, Minnesota. It's a state park by the Twin Cities, a little bit north of the Twin Cities.
So every hour on the hour, meaning say if you finish it and you're doing 8 minute pace and you come in with like 15 minutes to spare, you can't start another loop until everybody starts on that next hour, right?
Correct.
So I've heard some people describe these types of races as like the speed equalizer or like the diesel type of races because you can be as fast as you want to be, but at the same time, since you said like it's like a 15-minute mile, it's more of an endurance or a durability type of race.
Mm-hmm.
So one of the more famous ones in the country is Big's Backyard Ultra,
Yeah.
where they will typically go days and days and days. And I do believe another record was set this past year, but forgive me for not knowing it off of the top of my head, but it's upwards in the like 300 plus mile range. So when you think about
Yeah.
that, it's
I think
like
it was
3 days.
450. Yeah, I think it's 450 miles that they
Oh, wow. It's even more
did.
than I
It was
thought. Okay.
Harvey
Was it
Lewis.
Harvey Lewis? Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep. Yeah, and he is an absolute monster
Yeah.
at those events. So yeah, I mean, this is the type of event where you can come in and you can kind of play around with different strategy too. I mean, I like that you mentioned before that you almost use it as a training race for a different race,
Mhm.
just because it's more about like lasting potential and not necessarily just jumping from the gun.
And especially if you're training for 100 mile, it can be a good way to just like practice your race pace and race feel. It's like, yeah, if I can feel, finish 50K, without tapering, feeling pretty good at my, projected race pace, that's, pretty good. You're on track if you're a few weeks out.
Right. And a good way to practice fueling because it's right there every
Yeah,
4
yeah.
miles and you can try different things and
Yeah, I
yeah.
guess when you think about it this way, like every hour you have an aid station stop, like
Yep,
a mandatory aid
exactly.
station stop. So like if you
Yep.
come in like 45 or 50 minutes, that's that time to like while you're coming into the aid station, you can already have your trash in your hand. You can think about what you need. You can get all prepared as quick as you can. Make it like a really race simulated type of aid station stop instead of like a 15-minute laissez-faire. Like I'm just gonna mosey on through this one. Just that way you can like kind of like dial that stuff in. So I do like that. Like, yeah, you get all of that practice just coming into aid stations.
Yeah, totally. Mhm.
Yes. So the course that you're doing, I think some of the courses they change from trail to road like partway through. Does your course do that?
Right. This one does not. So it's trail, it's all trail. It's like not super technical trail. There's a bit of up and down. I think it's about 300 feet of elevation change per loop. So moderate. But yeah, no road sections on this one. They alternate the direction every 6 hours, I believe. So give you some variety, I guess, so you don't get too bored.
Nice. And now is this one, I think is like the top person gets a golden ticket to go to Big's backyard?
I believe that's the case.
Okay.
Yeah.
I know we had a course in our area that was a little bit more challenging. And so Laz suggested to make it a bit easier because it's not the intention to make them really hard courses. It's the intention to see how long someone can keep going for, you know,
Yeah, exactly.
for many miles and many hours. So
Right, right. Yeah, there's one
So
here in Duluth that's I don't know if they're doing it this year. They've done it a couple years. It's like a really hard course 'cause it's on the Superior hiking trail. So, running 4 miles an hour on the Superior hiking trail is actually, quite a challenge after.
right, right.
Yeah.
So training for something like this, and you're actually this time actually going for as long as you can is your goal, and it's more of I'm guessing more of an A race versus a training race. So
Mhm.
how are you doing? What are you doing different in your training to prepare for it? Is there anything you're doing that for race specificity specifically to this race?
Yeah, there are a couple things. So I would say like overall, like the foundational training principles like still apply, right? Like we're still, even though like I don't have a need to go fast at any point during the race, like I still do a speed workout every week, just to keep, that those systems on and going. And also sometimes it can be like a strategy to like sprint off the line, I guess, like towards the end of the race and psych other people out and make them quit so that you can win. There's all sorts of like mind games that go into these too. But yeah, I think the main difference is in some of the long runs. I'm just kind of doing like a backyard simulator, like, do 4 by 4 mile loops to add up to 16, 17 mile long run. And, practice, you know, resupplying at each loop and find a course that has similar elevation gain to what I'll be on. So I think, and then doing a little bit more like run and walk practice in training, like run, walk alternating and practicing walking at a good speed. Because if you can utilize like speed walking during the course in addition to running, that can give your running muscles a break and help you go longer.
Right, for sure. And I think that's a great idea, that 4 mile loop and the stop in between, because we do tend to get a little bit stiff once we stop, right? So
Mm-hmm.
practicing getting going again is nice, I think.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I won't
so
necessarily be like, yeah. I mean, I'll do long runs where I like time it to the hour exactly. But yeah, we'll see.
So the only race I've done that's similar to a backyard ultra is the nuclear meltdown elimination race. That was one that was hosted by Chris Remhoff and OMR. And it was fantastic. It was the same thing, 4.16 mile loop. You do every loop on the hour. But the winner's determined after 12 hours based on the fastest last lap.
Oh.
So I kind of have like at least like, let's say like 11 or 12 hours experience at a backyard ultra because it's the same format. But what I've noticed to what you said before, like I was still doing speed workout just because the race is, it's a fast last lap, of course. But what I
Mhm.
noticed is that while I was running my middle laps, was that like if I was going at an easy pace the entire time, I kind of just got stiff at those easy paces. So every
Yeah.
once in a while, I would run harder off of the line, or I would do a faster loop so that way like I could have more time to just kind of chill out later, and
Mhm.
at least
Yeah.
just kind of switch up the gait and kind of open up the hips and open up the glutes,
Mhm.
which you can kind of like, depending on your durability, you can kind of handle like a faster lap every few laps or so, just because then you have a lot more time to sit and recover.
Mhm.
And I think too, with that recovery in those intermediate loops, we're definitely actually, I'll save that for that piece. I'm getting ahead of myself. But yeah, to your point before, I think it's really smart to keep at least some sort of speed work into your plan because, most people that I work with, like if they're only doing that like aerobic pace work, like it can kind of get a little monotonous. And then to your point too, like, like you kind of lose that ability to get into those gears, especially for, like we do have these A races, but of course we plan on racing after that. So you can kind of make that transition into your next event a little bit smoother if you just keep like maintenance mode with some of those other systems.
Yeah, yeah. And I think it's just an extra tool in your toolbox too. Like if you can also run fast, it can, make your easy pace feel even easier. And
Mm-hmm.
it's just, yeah, again, like you can go faster for a little while if you feel like it and loosen the muscles up. It's just another tool.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, definitely, for
I
sure.
kind of want to talk gear. So like since it's a looped course, it's a 4 mile course. Like, what are you going to be carrying for gear? Like, if anything, how are you handling that?
Yeah, that's one thing I really like about this format because like I just don't like gear that much and having to carry a bunch of stuff and I use the like hydration vest but I like always find them uncomfortable after a while. So this is kind of nice. It's like I don't have to use that. I can just bring like a water bottle, a handheld out with me and then I know I have my resupply every every 4 miles. So I mean, I think I'll have a lot of stuff. I'm still kind of ironing out what I'll have at my like base camp. The race is at the end of April, so I have a few months or a few weeks, not months, to figure it out. But um, I imagine I'll have like a bunch of different foods and snacks and drink mix options, and warmer clothes for when it gets cooler or warmer. I know a chair is something that's recommended, so you can put your feet up in between the laps, I guess. So bring that probably.
So you're telling us this
Yeah,
might be the
tents.
one race where like it's not a chair of death, but a chair of life.
Yeah, well, you gotta wait till the rest of the hour anyway, so you might as well sit down.
Hmm.
Right. I feel like I've read, I think it's Courtney, but I may be wrong, makes smoothies at these events. Isn't that what she's drinking in between laps? I think it's Courtney, but it might be
Ah,
something else that I've read.
yeah,
So
that
that's,
could be good. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. I thought that sounded interesting. So,
Yeah, yeah. I think
yeah,
everyone's got their like nutrition piece that works out for this. Like I know like when I did the 50K at the backyard, like I found myself able to eat like lots more like solid foods than I usually can during a race. I think because you're just getting that like break
right.
you're not going very hard and then you're getting that break
Yeah.
to,
So you keep that blood flow in your gut so
yeah.
you can keep eating.
Yeah, exactly. So nutrition worked a lot better for me than
Right.
in my
It
Now,
actual
sounds
races.
yeah. Now, will you have a crew at this or you
Yeah,
just,
I'm gonna have a crew of some sort. I contacted some friends and hopefully my family will be able to come down for part of it and help out with that. So yeah, still ironing out details there, but I have to plan to have some people there helping me.
nice.
so it sounds like in this race more than other races, since the logistics are pretty easy. You're starting, you're ending at the same point. Ideally, you're probably going to have a little bit of time where you can just chill out and like not be in race mode, which I think is a huge psychological advantage because at a certain degree you can kind of just like say like, okay, I have 5 or 10 minutes where I just get to watch people come in, I get to cheer people come in, like whatever it is, I got all my stuff set. But it sounds like the most important thing is you're giving yourself options, especially since you're starting and ending at the same place. So like, why not bring more than you need just in case you need it? Because in that a
Right.
race like that, like, like we haven't really talked about like your goals or anything, but I would imagine you just want to survive as long as you can, right? And you don't know, like that's the thing about these races is that like you don't know when it's going to end, and there may not even be a winner. We didn't even talk about at the ending. The winner is decided based on whoever completes the last lap. But if two people tap out on the same lap, there is no
Yeah.
winner.
Right.
Um, so without knowing when the race is actually going to end, you need to be geared up for like not only like fueling and like maybe you have bottles or maybe you also bring a pack just in case you feel like you want to change into that or like you have
Mhm.
different layers or whatever, but you're giving yourself options just in case like you might need it. And I think that's pretty important for listeners to take away from this for sure.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, it kind of gives you the luxury to try like different things and you can, yeah, I think lots of different changes of clothes, because you'll have time to do that if you're wanting to.
Right. Now, I did attend a backyard that one of my athletes was doing, and they did switch courses at night. So in the day, they were on the trail, then they went to like the paved path through the park. And I think that was part of a park rule. But we all had to switch everything over. So your whole camp moved to a different location for the second.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
So that was interesting too. And it was interesting to see how quickly everybody's places went back up and was ready to roll, for the next
Yeah.
switch.
Oh, interesting. Yeah.
Speaking of not knowing when the end is actually going to occur, like, what are you thinking psychologically? Like, what's going on up here as you're getting prepared for a race that doesn't have an endpoint?
Yeah, I think so. Like, I think for me, like, I'm just thinking of this as like 100 miles, and maybe a little bit more, or maybe less, like who knows? Like it depends what other people do, right? So, and what happens to me. Yeah, so it is like I guess every race is kind of an unknown in some ways. Like you don't know how your body is going to respond after a certain distance. And so here it's just a little bit more unknowns. And it's like, yeah, I might be out between, 24 and 30 hours, let's say. That's kind of what I'm thinking. Then I believe the record for the races is 29 hours. So, but I don't know. Yeah, I don't know what's gonna happen, right? So,
Right.
yeah. So like sometimes, so it's similar to like 100 mile. It's like okay, I'll probably be out for 24 to 30 hours. It's just a bit of a different format of 100 miler. I don't really have aspirations to go 400 miles or anything.
That is something to talk about, so if you're just going that 24 to 30 hours, I say just lightly, if that range, most likely you're not going to be sleeping, right, during that time. And
Yeah. I mean, most likely not, but to be honest, both 100 milers that I've completed, I did sleep
oh, okay. Okay.
race. Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't do well with sleep deprivation apparently. So I think that'll be one of the biggest challenges as the race goes on because you don't have 45 minutes. You can just take a nap in this.
Right. Right.
You can take
And
a
yeah.
10-minute nap maybe, but yeah.
Yeah. And I think that's a big part about these backyard ultras is they can go on for a few days
Mhm.
and figuring out that sleep piece, especially it's unknown like how many days it's going to last. So do you start that sleep piece earlier, or do you wait later till you get into sleep deprivation? I think that's kind of the roll of the dice. And
Right.
then how long do I sleep each lap?
Right. And I think for me, yeah, I think it'll just be kind of play it by ear. Like if I'm starting to get really tired and sleepy, I could, tell my crew I'm gonna like time me to do like it's 7-minute nap on this lap or or something like that.
Yeah. Yeah.
I don't really have a sleep plan per se. Yeah, I think it's really unpredictable how my body
Mhm.
will respond to that.
Right.
Hopefully,
So
I'm hoping I can get good sleep like in the week leading up to the race and bank a little bit of sleep. But yeah, we'll see.
I saw an interesting Instagram reel with Victoria Brown from Canada. She does a lot of the 6-day events. I think she's done some backyards, and she was showing her routine for sleep training practice. So
Hmm.
putting on her headphones, putting on, her mask and practicing sleeping with that, which I thought was kind of interesting because those are some different variables that maybe you're not used to doing every night before bed, right? And being able to just be able to turn it off quick. You need to be used to that, I guess, and cut out some of that extra stimuli.
Yeah.
Loretta, you read my mind. That's what I wanted to bring up. Seasoned listeners will remember me, giving these tips about like training yourself to sleep. They've done a lot of studies with like Navy SEALs and like conditioning them, like literally classically conditioning them to be able to fall into sleep in unforeseeable circumstances. So a couple ways that you can do that are through your senses. So like what you mentioned, like putting the earmuffs on, putting like a mask on, or maybe like a weighted mask. Those are all cues for your body to say like, oh, we have this on. Like now this is not now it's time to go to bed. Another very powerful one that's easy to implement is different smells. So I had an athlete who was running a stage race, and a couple months beforehand, I was like, hey, like go to any store and just smell some of the essential oils. It doesn't have to be a particular flavor, but like whatever, or a particular smell, whatever you find calming and soothing, like get a diffuser, run it in your room every night before you go to bed for a couple months, just so that way your brain understands that like, hey, when I smell this smell, it's time to go parasympathetic. It's time to ease our way into sleep and into like that restful state. So maybe, a strategy for the race would be maybe that lap before you go to bed. Maybe that's a really slow lap, right? Like, or no, I guess it'd have to be a
You
fast
kind
lap.
of have to,
You need
yeah, that's the
time,
tricky
right?
thing about the
So,
backyard.
so
Yeah.
yeah, so this is like stream of consciousness. I'm just thinking right now because you don't want it to be so fast that you get your heart rate up and you get like
Right.
really sympathetic. So it's going to take you longer to fall back into sleep, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So
So maybe you start off fast for that lap and then you do the first half fast and then you slow down the second half. Yeah. I don't
Yeah,
know.
for sure. And maybe you have your vest like either ready for your next lap. So all you have to do is like wake up, grab and go. And then you start by walking that lap afterwards just to let your
Mhm.
body kind of like come back into wakefulness. And then you kind of pick it up a
Yeah.
little bit more. So yeah, I think, like taking all those variables into consideration is kind of important. And, you're going to have time to set up your sleep station, or if you have crew, and they're so willing to help you out with that, like that's definitely something that can keep you going, especially if you plan to be out there for multiple days or you're hoping to.
Yeah.
Sure. Some great tips for, you know what, these could work for tips for just good sleep, right?
Yeah, good sleep
As
in
runners.
general.
Yeah,
Also,
yeah,
yeah, for 200 miles. Someday I want to do like one of the 200-mile or 250-mile races, and so yeah, good things to keep in mind, especially the
yeah.
simple
Sure.
one. I like that. Um, I hadn't thought of that one before.
Yeah, yeah, that's good. So, what about it, when you're thinking about your training? So you're going to do maybe some looped kind of stuff. Will you also spend some nighttime hours out training, or is that something you do add into your training?
Yeah, I think I will at some point like do some evening runs, probably just once or twice.
Mhm.
And probably not the whole night because there's also the balance of like you don't want to like get yourself too deprived of sleep during your training because then you don't recover well. So it's kind of a balance there. But yeah, I'll do at least a little bit of running in the dark to practice my headlamp, my lighting setup and making sure that's good.
Yeah, that's what I like to have athletes do, just to practice it a couple times, just so you feel comfortable out there. You know what the lighting is going to be like. You
Yeah.
know, it just changes the what your footing a little bit, the way you see things. I wear contacts at night, so that changes my vision a little bit. So it's nice to get a little bit of practice, so that doesn't happen on race day. And then I
Mhm.
also like the thing that you said about, you know, when we're practicing for something, sometimes athletes tend to want to overdo something because they think more is better. But what you said is so true. I mean, sometimes we get into doing too much and then we're not recovering. And so then it's really not helping us to our end game, right? So if we decide, oh, I'm going to just keep increasing my mileage so much, for a long run, and then it's taking me too long to recover, then it's really not benefiting me, to
Yeah.
get ready for the race, I think.
And it depends, I think, on the rest of your lifestyle too.
For
It's like,
sure.
oh, can you like slack off for a few days at work after you do a night run? Like, I don't really have that luxury, so I'm not gonna go run all night as a training run. But maybe, if you do have that luxury, that could be something to look into.
For sure.
And I think that's where like too like previous experience is going to come into play. Like if an athlete is really unfamiliar with running at night, like for sure I think running at night is like a great idea, and this is kind of a good time to do it because you can head out the door at 7 p.m. and it's pitch black. You get done in an hour, it's 8 o'clock, and you have an hour or two to decompress and kind of like calm back down before you go to bed. But like as the race gets closer, if somebody's doing one in like June, July when it's light out till like 9 o'clock, like I would definitely skew more towards like getting good sleep and getting good recovery. And you can always think too that like, on like previous performance, right? I think like running at night's more of like a skill, like you were talking about, of like how long can I just be looking at my headlamp? Because like personally,
Mhm.
I would rather go out at night with no headlamp than in like this morning, I was running at 4:30 in the morning. It was pitch black. Of course, we got street lights on and stuff like that. But if even with all that, if I have a circular orb in front of me, oh, does it drive me nuts? So it's almost like, okay, we just got to touch up on like, maybe you need one or two like 30-minute runs just to like get refamiliarized with like, hey, what is it like to look at a headlamp for a while?
Mhm.
Yep.
Mhm.
And like you said before too, just like practicing with your gear to make sure that like, oh, I know about how long my headlamp is going to last, or practicing like, oh, maybe I want like a waist belt headlamp to make things easier. And I think too, like the perception of how fast you're actually going at nighttime kind of skews, especially with all that fatigue that you have. Because like nighttime running for me, like I'm like, wow, I must be flying. And then I look at my watch and I'm like, oh, I'm definitely not doing 6 minute mile pace. I'm like at 15, it's,
Yeah. Yeah.
it's like the world just comes faster at you.
Yeah,
So
it
just
does.
like getting used to that, I think is like big, but like, I don't like, I've heard of some athletes doing like some crazy nighttime runs or being like, I'm going to run from 10 p.m. until 4 in the morning, and then I'm going to sleep until noon, and then I have Saturday to recover or Sunday to recover, like whatever it is. And it's like, it's not just like a 1 day recovery when it comes to sleep.
No,
Like
yeah.
personally, if I miss out on a good night's sleep, like I usually don't feel it till like 2 days later. And often at that point, like it's the middle of my work week and I'm like, oh God, I feel dead, So it's almost one of those things that you don't want to like play around with too much, in my opinion, and just rely more on like previous experience and then just a few runs to touch up on like gear, perception, how am I going to react to headlamp, what do I like and not like about nighttime and stuff like that.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, that's what works best for me too.
Good.
But I don't know, I sleep so much. I need so much sleep. I think I'm like the opposite of one of those like light sleepers. Or
So from my previous nuclear meltdown race that I mentioned before, the 12-hour race, what I really noticed was
I
that,
really
of
like
course,
the name of that race, by the way. I like
you
the
do.
oh, it's a fun name, Nuclear
Oh, it's
Meltdown.
what I actually have. Okay, so I have the medal right here. I'm set up in a different spot as usual today, but it's got nuclear reactors on it because the trail goes right past the Byron like nuclear facility or whatever. So at like many points, you like look over and you just see these billowing smokestacks. It was so much fun. Chris, if you're listening, I wish you would put that one on again because it would be a blast to run. But one thing that I noticed about that race was that my recovery time afterwards was so expedited. Now, of course, it's 12 hours as opposed to like an indefinite type of race. But one thing that I tried to do each lap was make sure that I was getting protein in because I didn't want to have that like degradation. And if you're going to be going for such a long time that you plan on being out there for 24 hours and you have a little bit of time to relax, and then when you go out for your next lap, you're not racing everybody off the start. You're just racing the hour clock, right? So like what I would do is I would come back if I had like 10 to 15 minutes just to relax, like boom, I would just scarf a little bit of protein. I had that in various sources. People may or may not like what I'm about to say, but a couple hard-boiled eggs, maybe some tuna packets, maybe a protein bar, like whatever I wanted at the time that was like, like 10 to 15 grams of protein or so. Every few laps, maybe every 2 laps or whatever. And then it would start that next lap and I would be walking a little bit just so that way I wouldn't like upset my tummy from the protein and the 80-degree heat. So like, do you plan on implementing any of that or how are you because I'm thinking about people that are, like planning for 1, 2, 3 days or whatever it is. Like we're not only fueling for like a race and going to be chomping down gels, but we're going to be fueling for a while. What are your thoughts about like, supplementing with protein and real foods and like, how are you going to take those? I think people call them interloopal times.
Oh, is that what it's called? Yeah, I do think like more like real foods and solid foods are kind of the way to go for this type of format. Because like again, there's no need to ever run faster than like 12-minute miles, which for me is a pretty relaxed pace. And then you still have a solid 10-minute break to eat something in between. So yeah, I am experimenting with more yeah, adding a little bit more proteins and fats, and maybe like a little bit less carbs than I would normally take. Just because I've had like some stomach issues on some recent races where I was trying to get a lot of carbs in. And so yeah, that'll be something to practice in training. We'll see how it goes. Again, my nutrition went really well for the 50K of backyard I did. And I would definitely was taking in some protein sources there. And yeah, I've been like hearing more and reading more. It's like, yeah, you can do just carbs if you're out for maybe 8 hours or less or something. But after that, you need to start getting some proteins and fats in. So doing that from the beginning seems logical. And my race starts at noon too, which is a little bit different. So it starts right at lunchtime. So probably do some long runs starting at noon just to see how that feels and how I want to time breakfast and snacks for that. So,
Yeah, that's good too.
which I kind of like that though, because then I can like, get a good breakfast in and not like have just eaten breakfast when I'm on the starting line. So
I like the idea of a noon start. That's nice. I'd rather
yeah, sleep in.
better.
Yeah, I think noon start times are really awesome because you can sleep in, you can like, have your bathroom habits, you can get like a good decent breakfast and like start fueled. But sometimes people get nervous for start lines, right? So like do you find yourself like with a later start time thinking like, oh, I'm gonna sleep in later, so that way like there's not quite as much time for me to get excited about like the start line or like what is your psychology going into like a noon start? Are you excited, nervous?
Yeah, well, I think I'm more relaxed about this one just because even though it's like more unpredictable and that you don't know like how long you're going to be out there, it's also more predictable in that you know that you're running 4 miles every hour and you don't have to like make decisions about like should I try to like speed up here, like go faster there. Just like, the loop starts every hour. So just get in when you need to be ready for the next hour. So
Right.
I feel like my psychology is more going to be more relaxed for it. It's also a race that I've done before, and that tends to make me a little bit more relaxed too. I'm familiar with the terrain. And yeah, I think I would try to just let myself sleep as long as my body wants to. I usually don't sleep past 7 in the morning anyways. So maybe I can stretch it out till 8 in the morning. That'd be good. But yeah, we'll see. Just like not set an alarm. Wake up when I want. Yeah, just I think the more chill for me, the more chill I can be at the start of a really long race, the better. It's nice to have adrenaline for like a half marathon or a marathon or something, but not not so much for a longer ultra for me.
I agree. I usually I'm a lot more relaxed going into a 24-hour race or a 100-mile race than I am in like a marathon. Like if like all nerved up and I don't know. This is it's a shorter race. There's a lot things can go wrong quicker.
Yeah.
Where the
Mhm.
100 or the 24-hour, you got some time for some problem solving in between, and
Yeah.
you know.
Yeah, I personally like any race I do, if I can go in a little bit more calm, I think to myself like, hey, like that nervous energy is just like energy that could be put towards like running faster instead of just like, like sweating before the start line or like getting all
Yeah. Yeah.
excited. So like,
Right.
like breath work control and stuff like that. And
Mhm.
that's even something that, like would be good for like in between the loops too. Like so that way you can get your stomach in a spot so that way you can like eat and whatnot. Um, but okay, so those are all the things that like we can plan for. But what about the things that we can't plan for? Like I'm thinking like blisters or bugs or like are you going to be changing shoes? What is your plan there?
Yeah, I'm gonna try a couple different I like really just started training for this race because I did the Bandera 100K in January and then I had some recovery time and I did this ski race the Cordelopit a couple weeks ago. And so I'm and so for that, so I was like recovering and skiing a lot. And so I'm just getting back into more running like now. Actually, it's a pretty short training block. But yeah, I'm gonna be experimenting with some different shoes and see which ones I want to at least start out with for the race. And we'll yeah probably bring a different pair too in case, or maybe a couple different pairs. It's also a trail where you could probably get away with road shoes on if it's not too muddy. Just see what the conditions are and you know again I can have like bring 5 different pairs of shoes if I want, and try them all. Like, yeah, I don't really have a shoe plan other than starting out in something and bring some backups. And if it gets uncomfortable, then change shoes.
So again, like options for adaptability if need
Yeah,
be. Sounds like the ticket to
I think
success.
so. Yeah.
Well, that's phenomenal. Is there something that you're really like nervous about or that you're really excited about for the course or for the challenge itself? Like what kind of has those butterflies going?
Yeah, I think what I'm most excited about is just like trying this different format. A big problem that I tend to have in ultras is going out too fast. And so this will kind of force me to not do that. And so I'm really excited to see what I can do in this format. And if I can get like a sub 2400 miler out of it, that'll be really fantastic. And then if I can do more and, place highly or even win, that'll be even better. Although I don't know if I want to go to the one in Laz's backyard. So that would be another logistical issue, but we'll not get ahead of ourselves there.
So, talking about going out too fast, like, is there there's a lot of strategy, like you said, in these races, how people are going to approach each lap and their sleep and all of those pieces. But do you feel like there's a good time you want to have left when you come in? Do you want to come in with 15 minutes or 5 minutes or 8 minutes? Do you have an idea of what you're thinking about?
Yeah, I mean, I think around like 10 minutes is probably ideal. Which like when you're starting out, it just feels like a really slow
Right.
paced, like running 12 and 13-minute miles, right? But I think that's kind of ideal, because then you're never getting your heart rate up too high. You're just staying really relaxed and you have plenty of time to do everything you need to do at the aid station. And yeah, probably just keep that going as long as possible. Yeah, I'll have to think about the strategies for if I like really need a nap, if I want to try and do a faster lap before that, but probably just kind of play it by ear and see what happens. I
Right.
think like there's some data like from like the Big's Backyard Championship, and I think the winners were like running the loops average of 50 to 52 minutes or something like that. So
That's what I was thinking. And I was
yeah,
thinking, I read somewhere like that Courtney likes to have like I think, is it a 7 minute nap or something?
yeah, probably something like
Like
that.
a
Yeah.
real regime, like this is how I do
Mhm.
it. So
So it
yeah.
Yeah.
almost sounds like enough time to like have like a little bit of a breather, a little bit of a reset, a little bit of like aid station, little bit of aid station time, but it's not so long that you're just kind of like kicking your feet around or like getting
Right.
stiff, And I
Mhm.
think that might be like a good key too, is that like maybe if you're finishing up with so much time that like you are chilling in the chair for like 10 minutes after like resupplying and everything, like maybe that's actually in your detriment, because
Right.
we all
Yeah.
know that like getting up and shaking the legs, especially after a long day and trying to get moving again, is just like, ooh, you can feel it everywhere. Everything tightens up. So maybe
Yeah.
like giving the body enough of a rest so that way it can reset, but not so much that it starts to go into like stiffen up and like, oh, we're done running type of mode is kind of
Right.
the
Right.
ticket. And like almost like for training runs, then, right? Like we could almost go out and say, like, okay, we're going to experiment. Maybe you have like a 16-mile long run and you kind of do those loops and you come back in and you say like, okay, maybe I do this one at 12-minute pace and I come back with, like more than 10 minutes to spare. Or maybe I do this one at 10-minute pace and have a little bit more time, but like, how does that make my body feel
Yeah. Yeah.
later on down the road? Or maybe you do like a descending type of order. Maybe you start with a couple fast laps and then you move slow. So that way you're starting with a lot of fatigue on your legs and then you're identifying, hey, how do these laps make me feel? One
Mhm.
thing that I did for that nuclear meltdown race was that I would do a 20-mile long run and then I would just stand still. Like I would be in the garage, out of the sun. I would just stand still. I would like drink some water. I would like eat a little bit of food, as much as I was planning on, doing like on race day. And then I would go out and I would try to go run fast, like afterwards, and just like,
Mhm.
every once in a while, just getting used to that feeling of like, okay, we're picking back up after like, like tightening up after 10 minutes and just getting used to that feeling of like, oh, I can do this and I can like pick up my feet again.
Yeah.
But then that way you can even tell yourself or like figure out like, okay, now I know what it feels like to stand completely still after a long run. Now, what if I sit down for 5 minutes and then I get up and I start walking for 5 minutes and then I get going again? How do I feel? You know?
Yeah,
Mhm.
that's a
Yeah.
good point.
These are good training tips.
Yeah, when I was ran my first 12 hours, so I hadn't, I mean, that was my first real ultra, and I didn't really know how to approach it. It was several years ago now, but it was also like I think it was about a 4 mile loop, something like that, and it was for 12 hours. And in the beginning, we thought, oh, it would be good to rest and come around, get in the chair, grab something to eat, my husband would massage my legs and then I would go. Well, we quickly learned after a couple of laps that that was a really bad decision because every time it was also cold. So every time I stopped, I sat and had to get going. It took me like a mile to get going, you know, because later as it kept going. And so we decided this is not a good plan. So we didn't do that anymore. So then I just grabbed stuff and walked through. It was a 12-hour, so it wasn't, you know, I didn't have to start on the line every hour like you're going to have to,
Mhm.
but definitely that sitting down was not my best friend.
Yeah, yeah. And that's a good thing that yeah, I'm not sure. Like I think when I've sat down in races in the past that are not like backyard format, it's usually because I'm like really
Right,
struggling. Right. Like I'm nauseous, my heart rate's too high. I need to
right.
like do a bit of a reset. So yeah, I don't know if like the preemptive sitting down like in the early laps is good or bad. But I think yeah, I will experiment with those different things on training runs, Reese, to
Yeah, yeah.
kind
Try
of
it
figure
out
what feels good. Yeah.
for sure.
Yeah, that's amazing. And that just goes to like the specificity piece too that we always talk about, right? Is like no matter what race it is, whether it's 30 miles, 50 miles, 100 miles, 24 hours, 6 days in the dome, like backyard ultra is just like being really introspective and saying like, what are my strengths and weaknesses? And that could even be like, you know, injury wise too. Like, do you have anything that's been nagging you? You know, like what does that look like? And then how do I take those strengths and weaknesses and like work on them for my particular event that's coming up. So like one thing that I want to talk about too is like I never brought recovery tools to a race, and I know Coach Loretta, you have a little bit of experience with bringing recovery tools. Like, do you bring them like all the time to every race, just on your like looped races like that? Like, what do you bring? And Coach Madeline, what do you plan on doing for recovery in between the loops besides sitting down, maybe being a little bit more mobile, so that we don't get too tight and whatnot.
Mhm.
Because I would personally love to know too, because that last race that I ran, I didn't really bring anything. I just kind of shook my legs out. But
Mhm.
going back to like, hey, maybe we have like, some injuries that like kind of like creep up in training. Like maybe you have to bring specific things. Like,
Mhm.
what's your strategy?
Yeah, I think one thing I'll for sure bring is my like I just have like a mini little massage percussion device thingy, which is I think that'll be super helpful to have there. Um I don't know if I'll bring anything else besides that. I guess I could bring like a foam roller and things, but yeah, I haven't as you can see, I haven't put as much thought into this so far. But yeah, definitely the massage gun. I think I have one of those other those roll thingies like somewhere. I'll have to figure out where that's at. That'd probably be good to have too.
Yeah, and I
Yeah, I
I
know
do
that's something that people bring to the backyard ultras
yeah,
for sure.
and I do bring supplies with me for every race because you know I always have a crew, so I'm able to do that. A nice scraper is a really good thing to have. You can
Oh,
do
okay. Yeah.
grapes with it. Can't remember the name of it, but it's a plastic one that was recommended by my physical therapist. You know, you can do work out a few little areas if you're starting to get some niggles. I do often carry my hypervolt, but I've also learned that it's not the best deep into a race when your muscles are really fatigued. It's just too much compression at that time. So more
Okay.
of just some hand massage is a little bit better, I think.
Okay.
Um, I would be curious about how like a pair of compression boots would do, you know, in between loops. That's
Yeah.
an ability,
I
but
don't have any
I
of
don't know.
that,
Yeah,
unfortunately.
yeah, but that would be kind of interesting to me. I I will have in my kit some like little cupping if I, might need to have that done, in a race. I haven't used it, but I always like to have things like Reese said, like if you have the ability to have some of those things, it's nice to be able to have them on hand to use if you need them. But or maybe some kind of pain cream, to put on or that kind of stuff. I always have available. I'm not a huge foam
Oh,
roller, so I don't have
I
that. I
never
mean,
thought about that. That's something that would be really interesting for a race is like what's that like Tiger Balm or
Oh
something
yeah.
like that, just for those
Mhm.
little things that pop up that you want to nip in the bud right away. I didn't think about that. That's interesting. And those are just so tiny you could even like carry them in your pack and apply them on trail if you don't want to do it at the start finish. Yeah.
Yeah. Mhm.
Now, I will tell you, I was at a race. It was a marathon, and I was starting to chafe really. And so I'm like, okay, I need to do something about this chafing. And I get to this aid station and I grab this cream because I think it's like chafing cream, and I rub it all over where I'm chafing. And next thing I know, I'm on fire. It was like Ben Gay or something. So watch what you put on at the aid station.
Oh my God.
I'm like, okay, I think I was better with the chafing than with this. Like now I'm on fire.
All right. Well, it was a pleasure talking with you ladies. We're running into about like an hour now. I guess any final closing remarks, anything that we didn't touch on? Yeah, anything else?
I guess, yeah, one more thing about the backyard format that's cool, and I think everyone should try one at some point, like whether it's just a train and run and you want to do like a marathon or a 50K or go as far as you can. I think it's a really cool format. And part of that is like everyone runs together, for because there's no incentive to go super fast. And so, the back of the pack and the typical back of the pack and the front of pack is all together, which is really cool. So you get to run with people you might not normally run with, and everyone's kind of in it together, as long as they last in the race.
Oh, I love
Yeah.
that you said that. And you know what else I thought I loved about just being at the event is that it was like the race just kept starting over and over and over, like
Yeah.
day,
Mhm.
right? Like you're like back to the start, and it kind of just gives you like a little bit of enthusiasm. The front start of a race is, so much fun. And then you're all back together again and then you're going
Mhm.
again. So
Yeah,
probably
yeah.
doesn't feel like that deep into a race, right? But it does give some energy there.
I think so. Yeah, it provides more, yeah, like camaraderie, energy to kind of keep resetting every hour like that.
Right.
Yeah, I think that was one of my favorite things about that type of event was, you get to see everybody come in and you get to be cheered on by everybody like every hour, and it was fun watching, people either feel stronger as the day went on or, like consoling other people who are not having quite as well of a day, and just helping people keep going and cheering. And I do think too that like, there is a certain population of us who can get pretty anxious about like a starting line. And like say if that's you and you just want more practice at it, I remember personally like that first lap, like even though you have an hour to finish it, your heart rate's up, because you're excited to start. And then throughout the day you kind of get used to, okay, I'm lining up on the line, I'm going to hear the gun go off, but I don't have to let that get me excited. So maybe that's a good way too for people to start to get more
Desensitized.
familiar with start lines. Yeah.
Coach Reese's desensitization plan. Run a backyard over and over and
Yeah.
over.
Well, like as we all say, right? Like it's all mental. Like of course your fitness has to be there. You have to put the physical preparation in, but it is nice to be able to get to a starting line, take a nice deep breath, and not already be at a tempo heart rate before you've even started moving.
Right, right.
So, well, thank you all so much for joining, Coach Madeline. It was a pleasure getting to talk with you about your upcoming race. We wish you success in training and with execution, and we can't wait to hear how it goes. We would love to have you on afterwards just to hear about like what you ended up doing and how the day ended up unfolding for you. So, if you're open to it, we'll shoot an invite in about what is that? About a month and a half, 2 months almost.
Yeah, yeah, something like
What is
that.
the
Yeah.
date for your race again?
It's April 26th. Yeah,
April
it's a
26th. And
Friday.
what's the name of it again? Elm
The Elm Creek Backyard Ultra.
Backyard. Okay, we'll be tracking.
All right. Awesome. Thanks,
All right.
guys.
Well,
All right,
yep.
thanks.
Take
Bye,
care,
guys.
everybody. Enjoy the week.
All right. Bye.
Bye.